The human diplomat's boldness left the alien princess in awe. Ambassador Marcus. Chen straightened his formal diplomatic uniform as the massive crystal doors of the Zephyrian royal palace slid open, with a sound like singing wind chimes. The palace stretched before him like something from a fever dream, with walls that seemed to pulse with their own inner light, and corridors that defied gravity by spiraling upward into infinity. He had studied the architectural briefings, but seeing the impossible geometry with his own eyes still made his head spin. "Remember, Ambassador," whispered his aide, Sarah Williams, through his earpiece. "The Zephyrians value emotional control above all else. Show no surprise, no strong reactions. Their previous diplomatic encounters with other species have all followed this protocol." Marcus nodded slightly, keeping his expression neutral despite the wonder threatening to break through his diplomatic mask. The Zephyrian Empire controlled 17 star systems and possessed technology that could reshape matter at the molecular level. Humanity needed this alliance desperately, especially with the growing threat of the Void Reapers expanding into human space. The throne room doors opened to reveal a space so vast that clouds actually formed near the ceiling. Floating platforms of crystalline material drifted through the air, each one occupied by Zephyrian nobles, whose translucent skin glowed with shifting patterns of color that Marcus had learned indicated their emotional states. Right now, most displayed the cool blue-white of polite interest mixed with the pale yellow of mild curiosity. At the center of it all, on a throne that seemed carved from a single massive diamond, sat Princess Lyrelei Stormwind. Marcus had seen holographic images during his briefings, but nothing had prepared him for meeting her in person. She was tall even by Zephyrian standards, with skin that sparkled like starlight and hair that moved as if underwater, despite the absence of any breeze. Her eyes were the deep purple of space itself, ancient and knowing despite her relatively young age of only 300 years. "Ambassador Chen of the human delegation," announced the court herald in a voice that echoed strangely in the vast space. "You stand before Her Royal Highness Princess Lyrelei Stormwind, heir to the Crystal Throne and commander of the Third Stellar Fleet." Marcus approached the throne with measured steps, exactly as he had practiced. The Zephyrian court expected a specific type of formal greeting, involving a complex bow that showed respect without appearing submissive. He had spent weeks learning the precise angle and duration required, but as he drew closer to the princess, something unexpected happened. Her emotional patterns, visible in the shifting colors beneath her translucent skin, showed something he had never seen in any of the cultural briefings. There was the expected cool formality, but underneath it flickered something warmer, more curious. She was studying him with an intensity that made him feel like a fascinating puzzle rather than just another diplomatic obligation. "Your Highness," Marcus said, executing the formal bow perfectly, "I bring greetings from the United Earth Federation and hope for our mutual prosperity." Princess Lyrelei leaned forward slightly on her throne, her head tilting in a way that reminded Marcus oddly of a curious cat. "Ambassador Chen," she said, her voice carrying the musical quality that all Zephyrians possessed. "I have heard interesting things about your species. Tell me, is it true that humans are the only known species that continues fighting even when defeat is certain?" The question caught Marcus off guard. This was not part of the standard diplomatic opening he had prepared for. Around the throne room, he could sense the attention of the court focusing on him more intently. Whatever answer he gave here would set the tone for all future negotiations. "Your Highness, humans do possess a certain persistence in the face of adversity," Marcus replied carefully. "We prefer to call it determination rather than stubbornness." For the first time since entering the throne room, Princess Lyrelei smiled. It was a small expression, barely visible, but Marcus caught it. More importantly, the colors in her skin shifted to include flickers of gold, which his briefings had told him indicated genuine amusement. "Determination," she repeated, as if testing the word. How refreshingly honest. Most species that come before this court speak only in careful platitudes and rehearsed speeches. You humans seem incapable of hiding your nature entirely, even in formal settings. Marcus felt a slight warmth in his cheeks and hoped it wasn't visible. The princess was right, of course. Humans were notoriously bad at the kind of emotional suppression that other species seem to master effortlessly. It had always been seen as a weakness in galactic diplomacy. We have found that honesty, even uncomfortable honesty, tends to produce better long-term results than comfortable lies, Marcus said. deciding to lean into what she seemed to appreciate. The princess's smile widened slightly, and more gold appeared in her skin patterns. Several of the floating nobles around the room began displaying their own color shifts, suggesting his words were causing quite a stir in the usually formal court. Fascinating, Princess Lyrelai murmured, more to herself than to him. And tell me, Ambassador, what brings humanity to seek alliance with the Zephyrian Empire? Surely not just our military might, though I understand your people are facing threats from the Void Reapers. Marcus took a breath. This was where the real diplomacy would begin. But something about the princess's directness made him want to respond in kind, rather than falling back on the carefully prepared talking points his superiors had given him. Your Highness, my people are indeed facing an existential threat. But more than that, we believe that the galaxy is stronger when different species work together, each contributing their unique strengths. Humanity may not have your technological mastery or the Altarian Empire's psychic abilities, but we have our own gifts to offer. Such as? She asked, her purple eyes fixed on his with an intensity that was both unnerving and oddly thrilling. Marcus smiled, feeling some of his diplomatic mask slip away. We're very good at refusing to give up, Your Highness. Some might call it a character flaw. The sound that escaped Princess Lyrelai was unmistakably laughter, musical and bright. The entire court erupted in shifting colors as this unprecedented display of royal amusement sent ripples through the formal atmosphere. Marcus had just achieved something no other diplomatic mission to the Zephyrian court had ever managed. He had made their princess laugh. As the sound faded, Princess Lyrelai looked at him with new interest, her skin now showing complex patterns of gold, silver, and deep green that Marcus couldn't interpret but somehow knew were positive. I think, Ambassador Chen, that these negotiations are going to be far more interesting than I anticipated. The human diplomat's boldness left the alien princess in awe. The formal dinner that evening took place in what the Zephyrians called the Garden of Floating Stones, a vast chamber where crystalline platforms drifted through the air at different heights, each one supporting elaborate tables laden with foods that defied Marcus's understanding of both physics and biology. Some dishes glowed with their own inner light, others changed color as he watched, and one appeared to be singing in harmonious tones that made his teeth ache. Marcus found himself seated across from Princess Lyrelai on a platform that hovered roughly 30 feet above the main floor. The view was spectacular, but he tried not to look down too often. Humans weren't exactly built for casual dining at altitude, and his diplomatic training hadn't included a course on managing vertigo while conducting delicate negotiations. I hope the elevation doesn't disturb you, Ambassador, Princess Lyrelai said, noticing his careful grip on the edge of his chair. I chose this platform specifically because I wanted to observe how humans adapt to unfamiliar circumstances. It's certainly memorable. Your Highness? Marcus replied, managing to keep his voice steady despite the way the platform swayed gently in an unfelt breeze. Though I have to admit, most human diplomatic dinners involve significantly more solid ground beneath our feet. The princess laughed again, that same musical sound that had caused such a stir in the throne room. Most species request the lowest platforms possible when dining with us. They find the height unsettling. Yet you seem determined to adapt rather than asking for accommodation. Well, Marcus said, carefully reaching for what appeared to be a glass filled with liquid starlight. Asking you to completely redesign your dining customs to suit human preferences seems like a poor way to begin an alliance. Besides, the view really is remarkable. What he didn't mention was that his hands were shaking slightly, not just from the height, but from the surreal experience of sharing dinner with someone whose skin literally glowed with shifting emotions. Right now, Princess Lyrelai's patterns showed primarily gold and silver, which his cultural briefings had indicated meant genuine pleasure and interest. It was oddly mesmerizing. Tell me about Earth, Ambassador, the princess said, selecting something that looked like crystallized music from a nearby tray. Our intelligence reports speak of a world of impossible diversity, where different climates and ecosystems exist within traveling distance of each other. Is it true that your planet contains both frozen wastelands and burning deserts? Marcus smiled, feeling more relaxed despite their precarious dining location. It is. In fact, you can travel from snow-covered mountains to tropical beaches in the same day if you have fast enough transportation. Our world is Chaotic, I suppose, compared to the uniform crystal cities I've seen here on Zephyr Prime. Chaotic, Princess Lyrelei repeated, her skin patterns shifting to include streaks of bright orange that Marcus couldn't interpret. That word appears frequently in reports about human civilization. Your cities follow no logical patterns. Your governments seem to change constantly, and your people can't even agree on basic social structures. Most galactic species view this as evidence of primitiveness. There was no insult in her tone, but Marcus felt his diplomatic instincts engage. This was clearly a test of some kind. Your Highness, what most species see as chaos, we prefer to think of as adaptive flexibility. Yes, human societies are messy and often contradictory, but that same chaos that makes us seem primitive has also made us remarkably good at surviving unexpected challenges. Such as? She asked, leaning forward with obvious interest. Marcus set down his glass of liquid starlight, which had turned out to taste like cinnamon mixed with electricity. Well, for example, when the Void Reapers first appeared in our sector and destroyed our outer colonies, most species with more logical, organized societies would have calculated the mathematical probability of victory and surrendered to preserve their populations. Humans instead looked at the same data and decided the math was probably wrong. Princess Lyrelei's skin pattern shifted to display complex spirals of silver and deep blue. And were you correct? Was the math wrong? Probably not, Marcus admitted with a grin. But we decided to fight anyway because surrender felt worse than dying. That's the thing about humans, Your Highness. We're not always smart and we're definitely not always logical. But we're very, very stubborn about giving up. Even when giving up would save lives. Especially then, we have this annoying habit of believing that some things are worth dying for, even when we can't rationally explain why. Freedom, dignity, the right to make our own mistakes, the protection of those weaker than ourselves. Ask any human philosopher to define exactly why these things matter more than survival, and you'll get 12 different answers and probably a fistfight. The princess was quiet for a long moment, her skin displaying patterns Marcus had never seen before. Finally she spoke. The Zephyrian Empire has existed for 12,000 years, Ambassador Chen. We have achieved this longevity through careful planning, logical decision-making, and the avoidance of unnecessary risks. Our society is stable, our technology is advanced, and our citizens live in peace and prosperity. Marcus nodded. It's an impressive achievement, Your Highness. And yet, she continued, her voice taking on a thoughtful quality, in all those 12,000 years, we have never faced a threat like the Void Reapers. Our careful planning assumes rational opponents who can be negotiated with or deterred through shows of force. The Reapers appear to be neither rational nor deterrable. They simply consume everything in their path. Which is why you're considering an alliance with the chaotic, illogical humans, Marcus said, beginning to understand where this conversation was leading. Precisely. Our war councils have run simulations of every possible strategy against the Void Reapers, using conventional military doctrine. The probability matrices are discouraging, but there are no simulation models for human unpredictability because your tactics don't follow any recognizable patterns. Marcus felt a strange surge of pride, mixed with amusement. Your Highness, if you're looking for someone to fight an impossible war using tactics that make no logical sense, then you've definitely called the right species. Princess Lyrelei's skin erupted in brilliant gold patterns unlike anything Marcus had seen all evening. That, Ambassador Chen, may be the most diplomatically honest thing anyone has ever said in this palace. As if to emphasize her words, their floating platform suddenly lurched sideways, and Marcus found himself gripping the table to keep from sliding off his chair. But instead of apologizing for the unexpected movement, Princess Lyrelei was watching him with obvious amusement. A small test, she explained as the platform stabilized. Most diplomats would have immediately requested to move to a more stable location. You simply adapted and continued our conversation without missing a beat. Marcus realized he was grinning despite himself. Your Highness, if you think a wobbly dinner platform is going to rattle someone whose species once fought a war using modified agricultural equipment and pure spite, you may need to recalibrate your tests. The laughter that followed echoed across the entire garden chamber, drawing curious looks from the other floating platforms. Marcus was beginning to suspect that Princess Lyrelei hadn't laughed this much in years, and he found he quite liked being the cause of it. The human diplomat's boldness left the alien princess in awe. The next morning brought Marcus's first glimpse of what Princess Lyrelay had meant when she spoke of Zephyrian military precision. She had invited him to observe their morning training exercises, and what he saw in the vast crystal arena took his breath away. Thousands of Zephyrian soldiers moved in perfect synchronization, their formations flowing like liquid light across the training ground. Every movement was calculated, every maneuver executed with mathematical precision. "Impressive," Marcus murmured, standing beside the princess on an observation platform that overlooked the entire complex. "How long does it take to train soldiers to this level of coordination?" "Approximately 47 years, Princess Lyrelay replied matter-of-factly. "Zephyrian military doctrine requires absolute unity of thought and action. Each soldier must be able to anticipate the movements of every other soldier in their unit." Without conscious communication, Marcus watched as a group of warriors executed a formation change that looked like a choreographed dance, their weapons moving in perfect harmony. It was beautiful, but something about it bothered him in a way he couldn't quite identify. "And this has been effective against previous enemies?" "Extremely so. Our tactics are perfected through thousands of years of refinement. No enemy has ever successfully countered our military strategies." She paused, her skin displaying the subdued blue of controlled concern. "Until the Void Reapers. What makes them different?" Princess Lyrelay gestured toward the training ground, where the soldiers were now demonstrating a defensive formation that looked utterly impenetrable. "They don't follow patterns, Ambassador. Our warriors prepare for logical opponents who will attack weak points, retreat when faced with superior force, and respond predictably to tactical pressure. The Reapers do none of these things. They attack when they should retreat, ignore strategic objectives in favor of seemingly random targets, and continue fighting even when their forces are completely destroyed." Marcus nodded slowly, beginning to understand the problem. "So your perfect military machine is designed to counter other perfect military machines, but it struggles against chaos." "Precisely. It would be like training to play chess for 1,000 years, only to discover your opponent is playing by the rules of an entirely different game that you've never heard of." "Actually," Marcus said, a smile tugging at his lips, "that sounds exactly like something humans would do. We're terrible at following established rules, especially in warfare." Princess Lyrelay turned to look at him, her violet eyes curious. "Explain." Marcus thought for a moment, watching the flawless formations below. "Well, for instance, during our colonial wars 300 years ago, human forces were facing the Altarian Empire's psychic warriors. The Altarians could read our thoughts, predict our strategies, and counter every move we made using their mental abilities. How did you overcome such an advantage?" "We didn't overcome it," Marcus said with a grin. "We ignored it completely. Human commanders started making decisions by flipping coins, rolling dice, and in one famous case, asking a drunk bartender what he would do. The Altarians couldn't predict our moves because we weren't making logical moves. We were just making stuff up as we went along." The colors in Princess Lyrelay's skin shifted to include bright patterns of orange and silver. "That seems incredibly inefficient." "Oh, it was. We lost more battles than we won, took enormous casualties, and probably violated every principle of sound military doctrine. But we also won the war, because the Altarians couldn't adapt to fighting an enemy that refused to make sense." "Fascinating." The princess was quiet for a moment, studying the perfect formations below them. "And you believe this approach would be effective against the Void Reapers?" "I don't know," Marcus said honestly. "But I think it would be more effective than trying to beat them at their own game. The Reapers are chaotic, so matching chaos with chaos might work better than opposing it with order." Princess Lyrelay's expression grew thoughtful. "Show me," she said suddenly, "Your Highness." "Demonstrate. I want to see human military thinking in action." She gestured toward the training ground below. "My soldiers are currently running Formation 7 Alpha, a defensive pattern that has never been broken by any known enemy. Using only what you can observe from here, tell me how humans would attack it." Marcus studied the formation carefully. The Zephyrian soldiers had arranged themselves in interlocking circles, with each ring supporting the others in a pattern that protected against attacks from any direction. It was like a crystal fortress made of living beings, beautiful and seemingly impenetrable. "Well," Marcus said slowly, "the first thing a human commander would notice is that this formation assumes the enemy wants to break through it. Naturally, that is the purpose of an attack. But what if breaking through isn't the goal? Marcus pointed to the outer edge of the formation. What if instead of trying to penetrate your defenses, we simply walked around them? Princess Lyrelei blinked. Walked around them? The formation is designed to repel attacks, but it's anchored to this position. If we simply ignored it completely and attacked your supply lines, communication centers, or command posts instead, what would happen? For a long moment, the princess stared down at her perfect military formation. Then her skin erupted in chaotic patterns of color that Marcus couldn't begin to interpret. The formation would have to break apart to pursue you, she said slowly, but that would leave our strategic positions undefended. Exactly. And if they stayed in formation to protect those positions, we could just keep attacking targets they can't reach. It's not about fighting them better, it's about refusing to fight them at all. But that's... Princess Lyrelei paused, searching for the right word. Illogical. Completely, Marcus agreed cheerfully. It wastes time, ignores the enemy's strengths, and achieves objectives through the least efficient means possible. It's also exactly what the Void Reapers have been doing to everyone they've fought. The princess was quiet for several minutes, watching her soldiers maintain their flawless formation while Marcus's words sank in. Finally, she spoke. Ambassador Chen, I think I'm beginning to understand why the galactic community finds humans so unsettling. We get that a lot, Marcus replied, though usually they use stronger words than unsettling. And yet, she continued, her skin now displaying patterns of deep gold mixed with thoughtful purple, you may be the key to defeating an enemy that has confounded our greatest military minds. Marcus felt a flutter of hope in his chest. Does this mean you're interested in the alliance, Your Highness? Princess Lyrelei turned to face him fully, and the intensity in her violet eyes made his breath catch. Ambassador, I'm interested in far more than just an alliance. I want to learn how human minds work, how you make decisions without logic, how you find victory in chaos. She stepped closer, and Marcus caught a faint scent like ozone and starlight. I want you to teach me to think like a human. The request was so unexpected that Marcus felt his diplomatic training abandon him entirely. Your Highness, I'm not sure that's even possible. Human thinking isn't something you can learn from a textbook. Then don't teach me from textbooks, she said, her skin now glowing with patterns of silver and gold that made her look like a living constellation. Show me, take me with you when you return to human space. Let me see your chaotic world firsthand. Marcus's mind raced. A Zephyrian princess traveling to Earth would be unprecedented, potentially revolutionary and absolutely terrifying from a security standpoint. It was also possibly the most important diplomatic breakthrough in human history. Your Highness, he said carefully, that would be highly irregular. Princess Lyrelei smiled, and the expression transformed her entire face. Ambassador Chen, after spending time with humans, I'm beginning to think that highly irregular might be exactly what this galaxy needs. The human diplomat's boldness left the alien princess in awe. The emergency session of the Zephyrian High Council convened at dawn, and Marcus found himself standing in a chamber that made the throne room look intimate by comparison. 12 ancient Zephyrians sat in floating crystal chairs arranged in a perfect circle, their combined age totaling over 30,000 years. Their skin patterns were uniformly cold blue and silver, indicating formal disapproval mixed with barely contained alarm. This is unprecedented, declared Councillor Vexthala, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. No member of the royal family has ever left Zephyr Prime for any reason other than state visits to allied worlds. What Princess Lyrelei proposes is not diplomacy, it is madness. Princess Lyrelei floated in the center of the circle on her own platform, her posture regal despite the obvious tension in the chamber. Honored councillors, madness may be precisely what we need. Our conventional approaches have failed against the Void Reapers. Perhaps it is time to try something unconventional. You propose to journey to a primitive world inhabited by violent barbarians, Councillor Zelthane interjected, her skin flashing angry orange. Human space is a war zone. Their own reports show constant conflicts between their various factions. You would be placing yourself in extreme danger for no strategic benefit. Marcus cleared his throat carefully. If I may, honored councillors, while human space does experience conflicts, we have maintained peace treaties with all major powers for the past 50 years. Princess Lyrelei would be under the protection of the United Earth Federation and would be safer than she might be fighting Void Reapers in Zephyrian space. The comment earned him several sharp looks from the council, but Princess Lirelai's skin displayed flickers of amused gold. Furthermore, Marcus continued, feeling he might as well commit fully to what his diplomatic training would certainly classify as career suicide, the princess wouldn't just be visiting as a tourist. She would be conducting essential research into human tactical thinking that could save both our civilizations. Research? Counselor Vexthala's tone could have frozen hydrogen. What possible research could justify such risk? Princess Lirelai leaned forward on her platform. The research that might teach us to defeat an enemy we cannot currently comprehend, honored counselor. Ambassador Chen has demonstrated that human thinking operates by fundamentally different principles than our own. Where we see disorder, they see opportunity. Where we calculate odds, they ignore mathematics entirely. This perspective might be exactly what we need. Or it might contaminate our military doctrine with primitive barbarism, Counselor Zelthane retorted. The Zephyrian Empire has survived for 12 millennia through discipline, logic, and careful planning. You propose abandoning these principles in favor of chaos. Not abandoning, Princess Lirelai corrected, her voice taking on a tone that reminded everyone present that she was, despite her youth, the heir to the Crystal Throne. Adapting. Evolution requires adaptation to changing circumstances, does it not? The debate continued for hours, with Marcus growing increasingly aware that he was witnessing something extraordinary. The Zephyrian High Council rarely debated anything, since their culture valued consensus and logical decision-making. The fact that they were arguing at all suggested that Princess Lirelai's proposal had struck at something fundamental in their worldview. Finally, the eldest counselor, Ancient Morthessa, spoke for the first time. Her voice was like wind through crystal caves, worn smooth by centuries of wisdom. Young princess, she said. And even though Lirelai was 300 years old, the term was accurate by Zephyrian standards. You ask us to trust not only in human protection, but in human methods. Yet everything we know about this species suggests they are prone to violence, emotional instability, and illogical decision-making. Why should we believe they can teach us anything of value? Marcus felt every eye in the chamber focus on him. This was the moment that would determine everything. The question that would make or break not just the alliance, but potentially the survival of both species. He could feel Princess Lirelai watching him with particular intensity, her skin patterns cycling through colors he couldn't interpret. Honored counselor, Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. You're absolutely right. Humans are violent, emotional, and often completely illogical. We start wars over abstract principles, risk our lives for people we've never met, and regularly choose the difficult path even when easier options are available. By any rational standard, we should have destroyed ourselves centuries ago. The council members' skin patterns shifted to various shades of cold disapproval, but Marcus pressed on. But here's the thing that I think you're missing. We're still here. Despite our violence, we've created one of the most stable multi-world federations in the galaxy. Despite our emotions, we've developed technologies that impressed even your scientists. And despite our illogical thinking, we've won wars against species that should have crushed us easily. He paused, looking around the circle of ancient faces. The Void Reapers are going to keep coming whether you understand them or not. Your perfect logic hasn't stopped them, and your flawless military tactics haven't defeated them. So maybe, just maybe, it's time to try something that doesn't make sense. You're asking us to trust in madness, Counselor Vexathala said flatly. I'm asking you to trust in a different kind of sanity, Marcus replied, one that has kept humanity alive against impossible odds for centuries. The chamber fell silent except for the ambient hum of the crystal architecture. Marcus could feel his heart pounding as the ancient counselors considered his words. Princess Lirelai remained motionless on her platform, but her skin displayed complex patterns that suggested she was as nervous as he was. Finally, Counselor Morthessa spoke again. Princess Lirelai, if we were to approve this unprecedented journey, what guarantees could you offer for your safety? None, Princess Lirelai said simply, and the honest answer sent ripples of shock through the council. I cannot guarantee my safety any more than I can guarantee our survival if we continue with current strategies against the Void Reapers. But I can guarantee that doing nothing will eventually lead to our destruction. Her skin began to glow with patterns of deep purple and gold. Colors that Marcus had learned indicated absolute determination mixed with hope. Honored counselors, I believe that learning to think like humans might save us all. I am willing to risk my life to find out if I'm right. The council deliberated in silence for long minutes, their skin patterns shifting through complex communications that Marcus couldn't follow. Finally, they reached consensus. Very well, Counselor Morthessa announced. The High Council grants permission for Princess Lyrelei to accompany Ambassador Chen to human space, under the condition that she remains under Federation protection at all times and returns immediately if the Void Reapers threaten Zephyrian territory. Marcus felt his knees go weak with relief. But Princess Lyrelei's skin erupted in brilliant gold and silver patterns that lit up the entire chamber. For the first time in the recorded history of the Zephyrian Empire, a member of the royal family was leaving their homeworld to learn from an alien species. As the council session ended, Princess Lyrelei approached Marcus with an expression that mixed excitement with determination. "Ambassador Chen," she said, "I hope you're prepared to show me everything that makes humanity so impossibly stubborn. I have a feeling we're going to need every bit of that stubbornness in the battles to come." The human diplomat's boldness left the alien princess in awe. The journey to Earth aboard the human diplomatic vessel. Defiant gave Princess Lyrelei her first real exposure to human chaos in action. Within hours of departure from Zephyr Prime, she had witnessed 3 separate arguments among the crew, a heated debate about optimal navigation routes that ended with someone throwing a sandwich, and a poker game that somehow involved betting with both standard credits and personal favors. "Is your entire species this energetic?" she asked Marcus as they stood on the observation deck, watching Earth grow larger in the view screen. Her skin displayed patterns of fascination mixed with bewilderment. "Actually, this crew is pretty calm," Marcus replied with a grin. "You should see what happens when we're not trying to make a good diplomatic impression." Princess Lyrelei had spent the 3-week journey documenting everything she observed, and her notes would have horrified the Zephyrian High Council. Humans, she had discovered, made critical decisions based on incomplete information, changed their minds frequently without apparent cause, and seemed capable of maintaining friendships with people they disagreed with about fundamental issues. It was like watching a civilization held together by organized chaos. "Ambassador," she said as Earth filled the view screen, "your species really shouldn't work, should it? By every logical measure, human society should have collapsed centuries ago." "Probably," Marcus agreed. "We've certainly come close a few times. But somehow we always manage to pull together when it really counts. You're about to see that firsthand." The approach to Earth showcased humanity's contradictory nature perfectly. The planet's orbital defenses were clearly visible. Massive weapons platforms and shield generators that spoke of a species perpetually prepared for war. But flying alongside the military installations were civilian vessels of every description, from massive cargo haulers to tiny personal craft, all going about their business with apparent unconcern for the weapons surrounding them. "Your people live their daily lives next to instruments of war," Princess Lyrelei observed. "Doesn't this create constant anxiety?" "It used to," Marcus said. "But humans have this remarkable ability to adapt to almost anything. Give us a few generations and we'll turn the most hostile environment into home." "Those defense platforms? Most Earth children grow up thinking they're just part of the landscape, like mountains or clouds." The landing on Earth provided Princess Lyrelei with her first real shock. Instead of the sterile perfection of Zephyrian spaceports, the human facility was a bustling maze of activity that seemed to operate without any central control. Cargo moved in seemingly random directions. People hurried between buildings with no apparent coordination, and the noise level was extraordinary by Zephyrian standards. "Welcome to Luna City Spaceport," Marcus announced as they disembarked. "The busiest transportation hub in human space and probably the most chaotic place in the galaxy." Princess Lyrelei watched in fascination as a human cargo handler somehow managed to move a container 3 times his own weight using nothing but leverage and creative profanity. Nearby, a group of children pressed against the observation windows, watching incoming ships with obvious excitement despite the fact that they must see dozens of arrivals every day. "They find joy in routine activities," she murmured, documenting her observations. "Even their work appears to be fun?" "Humans tend to make fun wherever they can find it," Marcus explained. "Life's too short and too unpredictable to spend all of it being miserable. You'll understand better once you meet Admiral Stevens." Admiral Sarah Stevens turned out to be everything Princess Lyra Lai had expected from human military leadership, and nothing she had prepared for. The Admiral was clearly competent, her office filled with tactical displays and strategic documents, but she also had a coffee mug decorated with cartoon animals and a small plant that she talked to while reviewing reports. "Your Highness," Admiral Stevens said, rising to shake hands in the human fashion. "Welcome to Earth. I hope the journey wasn't too educational." "It was extremely educational, Admiral," Princess Lyra Lai replied, her skin displaying patterns of honest appreciation, "though I'm beginning to understand why other species find humans difficult to predict." Admiral Stevens laughed. "Wait until you see our war planning sessions. Marcus tells me you want to learn human tactical thinking. I need to understand how your species approaches impossible situations," Princess Lyra Lai said seriously. "The Void Reapers represent a threat that our logical strategies cannot counter. We require alternative approaches." "Well, you've come to the right place. We specialize in alternative approaches." Admiral Stevens gestured toward a chair. "Tell me, what do Zephyrian commanders do when faced with a situation where every logical strategy leads to defeat?" "We re-examine our assumptions and look for errors in our calculations," Princess Lyra Lai answered, though something about the Admiral's tone suggested this wasn't the answer she was looking for. "And if there are no errors? If the math really does show that you can't win?" Princess Lyra Lai was quiet for a moment. "We would minimize casualties and seek acceptable terms for surrender." "Ah," Admiral Stevens said, settling back in her chair. "That's where we're different. When human commanders face impossible odds, we don't look for acceptable terms for surrender. We look for unacceptable terms for the enemy to claim victory." "I don't understand," Admiral Stevens smiled, and the expression reminded Princess Lyra Lai strongly of Marcus's grin when he had discussed military tactics on Zephyr Prime. "Let me show you our current battle plans for defending against the Void Reapers." The holographic display that materialized above the Admiral's desk showed the human sectors of space, with projected Reaper advance routes marked in red. The tactical analysis was sobering. The Reapers had overwhelming numerical superiority, superior technology, and no apparent weaknesses that conventional strategy could exploit. "According to every computer model we've run," Admiral Stevens explained, "we can't win a direct confrontation. The Reapers will eventually overrun our defenses and consume our worlds. Any logical species would be preparing for evacuation or surrender. But humans aren't logical," Princess Lyra Lai said, beginning to understand. "Exactly. Instead of accepting defeat, we've spent the last year asking a different question. How can we make victory so expensive for the Reapers that they'll decide we're not worth the effort?" The display shifted to show a network of hidden weapon caches, booby-trapped facilities, and evacuation routes that led not away from the fighting, but deeper into Reaper territory. It was like looking at a military strategy designed by someone who had never heard of conventional tactics. "You're planning to lose every major battle while making each loss as destructive as possible for the enemy," Princess Lyra Lai said, her skin cycling through colors that indicated her mind was working furiously to process this approach. "We're planning to turn every human world into a trap," Admiral Stevens corrected. "The Reapers expect resistance to collapse once they establish local superiority. Instead, they're going to find that conquering human space is like trying to eat a meal made entirely of broken glass. Technically possible, but so unpleasant that most sane creatures wouldn't bother." Princess Lyra Lai stared at the tactical display for long minutes, watching simulation runs that showed human forces being destroyed again and again, while inflicting catastrophic damage on their attackers. It was like watching a battle plan designed by someone who viewed defeat as simply another tactical option. "This is insane," she whispered. "Completely," Admiral Stevens agreed cheerfully. "It violates every principle of sound military doctrine, ignores basic strategic logic, and will probably get most of us killed. It's also the only plan that has any chance of actually working against an enemy that can't be reasoned with or deterred. But your people, they're willing to fight a war they know they'll lose." Admiral Stevens' expression grew serious. "Your Highness, humans have been fighting wars we thought we'd lose for thousands of years. Sometimes we're wrong and win anyway. Sometimes we're right and lose gloriously. Either way, we go down swinging because that's what humans do." Princess Lyra Lai felt something shift in her understanding of the species she was dealing with. These weren't just stubborn barbarians or chaotic primitives. They were a people who had turned their refusal to accept defeat into an art form. "Admiral Stevens," she said slowly, "I believe my people need to learn more than just your tactical thinking. We need to learn how to be human." The human diplomat's boldness left the alien princess in awe. The emergency alert came at 3 a.m, Earth Standard Time, jolting Princess Lyreley from her first real sleep in human accommodations. The harsh buzzing of the alarm system was unlike anything in Zephyrian architecture, designed to wake people instantly, rather than gradually bring them to consciousness. As she struggled to orient herself in the unfamiliar quarters, Marcus's voice came through the communication system. "Your Highness, we need you in the war room immediately. The Void Reapers have attacked Zephyr Prime." Princess Lyreley's skin went completely white, all color patterns vanishing as shock overwhelmed her emotional display systems. She had never experienced anything like the terror that now gripped her as she raced through the corridors of the Earth Defense Command Center, still wearing the simple human clothing she had adopted during her stay. The war room was chaos incarnate. Dozens of humans rushed between stations, shouting information and updates while holographic displays showed the battle unfolding in real time across the impossible distances of space. Princess Lyreley found herself in the eye of a hurricane of activity that would have paralyzed a Zephyrian command center but somehow allowed the humans to process information at incredible speed. "Report," she demanded, her voice carrying the authority of her royal position despite her obvious distress. Admiral Stevens looked up from a tactical display, her face grim. "The attack began 4 hours ago. 3 Void Reaper fleets appeared simultaneously in your home system, bypassing all outer defenses. Your military's fighting back, but..." She paused, clearly reluctant to continue. "Tell me everything," Princess Lyreley ordered, her skin beginning to show flickers of the deep blue that indicated royal command mode. "The Zephyrian fleet is performing exactly as expected," Admiral Stevens said carefully. "Perfect formations, flawless tactical execution, textbook defensive strategies. They're fighting brilliantly by every conventional measure. But they're losing. Badly. The Reapers are ignoring your tactical superiority completely, just throwing ships at your formations until they break through by sheer attrition. Your forces are too disciplined to adapt quickly enough." Princess Lyreley felt something crack inside her chest as she watched the tactical display. Her people, her family, her entire civilization was being systematically destroyed while she stood helpless in an alien command center. The irony was bitter. She had come to learn human flexibility and now rigidity was killing her people. "How long?" she asked quietly. "At current rates of loss, the Zephyrian fleet will be combat ineffective within 6 hours, Admiral Stevens replied. After that, she didn't need to finish. Everyone in the room knew what happened to worlds that fell to the Void Reapers. Complete consumption. Every trace of life absorbed into their incomprehensible collective. Princess Lyreley was watching her civilization die in real time. "There has to be something we can do," she said, her voice breaking with desperation. "Some way to help them." Marcus stepped forward, his face showing the kind of determination she had begun to recognize as distinctly human. "Actually, Your Highness, there might be." Admiral Stevens frowned. "Marcus, our nearest fleet is 8 days away at maximum speed. Even if we left immediately..." "Not our fleet," Marcus interrupted. "Her," he pointed at Princess Lyreley. "She has something no human commander could ever have. Direct communication with the Zephyrian fleet and the authority to order them to change tactics." Princess Lyreley felt a spark of hope. "You mean I could coordinate with your tactical advisors and relay human strategies to my forces?" "Better than that," Admiral Stevens said, her eyes lighting up with understanding. "We could put you in direct command of a joint operation. Human unpredictability guided by someone who knows Zephyrian capabilities intimately." "But I don't know human tactics," Princess Lyreley protested. "I've only been here for 3 weeks." "You don't need to know our tactics," Marcus said with that familiar human grin that somehow appeared even in the face of catastrophe. "You just need to learn to think like us, to stop making sense." The next hour was unlike anything Princess Lyreley had ever experienced. Surrounded by human tacticians who threw out suggestions with no apparent regard for feasibility or logic, she found herself looking at the battle from completely new perspectives. Instead of trying to counter Reaper strategies, they proposed ignoring them entirely. Instead of protecting important targets, they suggested sacrificing them in ways that would confuse the enemy. What if we deliberately broke formation? She found herself asking, her skin displaying patterns of excitement mixed with terror, not as a retreat but as an attack strategy. Explain, Admiral Stevens said, leaning forward with interest. Princess Lyrelay studied the tactical display, trying to see the battle through human eyes. The Reapers expect us to maintain our defensive formations. What if we scattered completely? Made it impossible for them to predict which targets to prioritize? Chaos formation, one of the human tacticians called out. Classic misdirection strategy. Make the enemy waste time trying to understand a pattern that doesn't exist. But Zephyrian ships aren't designed for independent operation, another officer objected. They're trained to fight as units. Then we give them new units, Princess Lyrelay said, her mind racing. Random assignments, ships that have never worked together before. Force them to improvise instead of following doctrine. Admiral Stevens smiled. Your Highness, you're starting to think like a human. The communications link to the Zephyrian fleet took several precious minutes to establish, and when Princess Lyrelay's face appeared on the screens of her people's command ships, the relief was visible even across the vast distances of space. But when she began issuing orders that violated every principle of Zephyrian military doctrine, the confusion was equally apparent. Your Highness, came the voice of Fleet Admiral Kethran, her mentor and one of the Empire's greatest military minds. These orders are highly irregular. Our formations are holding. Why would you want us to break them deliberately? Because holding isn't winning, Admiral, Princess Lyrelay replied, her voice carrying an authority that surprised even her. The Reapers are defeating our logic with chaos, so we're going to defeat their chaos with different chaos. I don't understand. You don't need to understand, Princess Lyrelay said, and realized she was quoting something Marcus had told her weeks ago. You just need to trust me. Break formation on my signal and attack whatever targets seem most illogical. Ignore strategic objectives and go after whatever the Reapers least expect you to attack. Your Highness, this violates every— Admiral, Princess Lyrelay interrupted, her skin now glowing with patterns of absolute royal authority. Our people are dying while we follow rules. It's time to break some rules. The transformation was visible on the tactical displays. Zephyrian ships began scattering across the battlefield, their perfect formations dissolving into apparent chaos. But it was directed chaos, with Princess Lyrelay coordinating the madness from her position on Earth while human tacticians fed her suggestions that no Zephyrian mind would have considered. The effect on the Void Reapers was immediate and dramatic. Their attacks, which had been systematically dismantling Zephyrian formations, suddenly had no clear targets. Ships that should have been defending critical installations were instead attacking Reaper supply lines. Vessels that appeared to be retreating were actually moving into flanking positions that violated every principle of space combat. It's working, Admiral Stevens breathed, watching the tactical display in amazement. The Reapers are trying to respond to patterns that don't exist. Princess Lyrelay felt something she had never experienced before. The savage joy of victory achieved through impossible means. Her people, who had never improvised a battle plan in their entire military history, were learning to fight like humans, and the Void Reapers, for the first time since anyone had encountered them, were losing. Your Highness, came Admiral Kethran's voice over the communications link, and she could hear the wonder in his tone. The enemy appears to be confused. Their attack patterns are becoming increasingly erratic. Keep them confused. Admiral, Princess Lyrelay replied, her skin now displaying patterns of gold and silver that made her look like a living constellation. Attack everything they don't expect and ignore everything they do. Make them think we've all gone insane. Have we? Admiral Kethran asked, and Princess Lyrelay could swear she heard amusement in his voice. Completely, she replied with a grin that was purely human. And that's exactly why we're winning. The human diplomat's Boldness left the alien princess in awe 6 months after the Battle of Zephyr Prime. Princess Lyrelay stood once again in the Crystal Palace throne room, but everything had changed. The perfect symmetry of the chamber remained, but the rigid formality that had once defined Zephyrian court life had given way to something entirely new. Officers moved with purpose rather than ceremony. Advisors debated strategies openly instead of maintaining silent consensus. And for the first time in the Empire's 12,000-year history, The sound of laughter occasionally echoed through the crystalline halls. The victory over the Void Reapers had been complete and total, achieved through tactics that the Zephyrian military academies were still struggling to categorize. The enemy fleets had retreated in confusion after encountering an opponent that refused to behave according to any known strategic doctrine. More importantly, word of the defeat had spread throughout Reaper space, causing them to avoid both human and Zephyrian territories entirely. The integration protocols are proceeding ahead of schedule. Your Highness, reported Admiral Kethran, whose tactical displays now included what he called chaos patterns alongside traditional formation charts. Our joint training exercises with human forces have produced remarkable results. Princess Lyrelay nodded, studying the reports that showed Zephyrian and human ships learning to fight together in ways that neither species could have imagined alone. The humans brought their gift for improvisation and unpredictable tactics, while the Zephyrians contributed their technological superiority and disciplined execution. The combination was proving devastatingly effective against any opponent foolish enough to test it. And the cultural exchange programs? She asked. Beyond all expectations, Admiral Kethran replied, his skin displaying patterns of amazement. Young Zephyrians are volunteering in unprecedented numbers to study at human universities, while human students on our worlds are showing remarkable aptitude for our advanced sciences. The scholars believe we're witnessing the birth of an entirely new form of civilization. Princess Lyrelay smiled, remembering her first shocked reaction to human chaos. Now she understood that what appeared to be disorder was actually a different kind of order, one flexible enough to adapt to any challenge. The Zephyrians had gained something they had never possessed in their long history, the ability to change. Your Highness, Marcus said, approaching the throne with the casual confidence that she now realized was distinctly human. The Earth delegation is ready for the formal alliance signing. President Walsh and Admiral Stevens are both eager to meet with the High Council. How do they find our world? Princess Lyrelay asked, curious about the human perception of Zephyrian perfection. Marcus grinned. Impressive, but a bit too clean for most human tastes. Admiral Stevens asked if we could introduce some creative chaos to the architecture. I had to explain that suggesting modifications to the Crystal Palace might be considered slightly inappropriate. Actually, Princess Lyrelay said thoughtfully, it might not be. The High Council has been discussing ways to modernize our approach to many traditions. Your influence has been quite profound. The formal ceremony took place in the Garden of Floating Stones, where Princess Lyrelay had first shared dinner with Marcus months ago. The setting was appropriate, as the impossible architecture had come to symbolize the bridge between two very different approaches to existence. Representatives from dozens of worlds attended, all eager to understand how two such dissimilar species had forged an alliance that was already reshaping galactic politics. President Walsh, a small woman with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing, stood with Princess Lyrelay before the assembled delegates as the formal alliance documents were signed. The treaty was itself a masterpiece of diplomatic compromise, combining human flexibility with Zephyrian precision to create something entirely new in galactic law. This alliance represents more than a military partnership, President Walsh announced to the gathered crowd. It represents proof that the galaxy's diversity is its greatest strength. When different approaches to problem-solving are combined, rather than competing, the results exceed anything either side could achieve alone. Princess Lyrelay felt a surge of pride as she watched the ceremony, but it was tinged with something else, a sense of completion that she had never expected to find. The formal negotiations were important, but the real transformation had happened gradually, through countless small interactions between humans and Zephyrians who had learned to see the universe through each other's eyes. Your Highness, Marcus said quietly as the ceremony continued around them, I have something to ask you. She turned to look at him, noting the slight nervousness in his expression that suggested this was personal, rather than diplomatic. What is it, Ambassador? Actually, that's the question. The formal alliance is signed. The military integration is proceeding smoothly, and both our governments seem quite capable of handling future negotiations without constant oversight. I was wondering. He paused, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. What happens next? Do you return to your royal duties and I go back to standard diplomatic assignments? Princess Lyrelei considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, the answer would have been obvious. Royal duty demanded that she resume her position in the Zephyrian court, while diplomatic protocol required Marcus to accept whatever assignment his superiors deemed appropriate. But 6 months ago, she hadn't learned to think like a human. "Marcus," she said slowly, "what do you think should happen next?" "Honestly, I think we're just getting started. This alliance is going to need people who understand both species, who can serve as translators not just of language but of entire ways of thinking. I think we could do more good working together than we could in traditional separate roles." Princess Lyrelei felt her skin begin to glow with patterns of excitement mixed with determination. "Are you suggesting we abandon our respective positions to become, what, freelance cultural ambassadors?" "I'm suggesting we create an entirely new position," Marcus replied with growing enthusiasm. "Joint liaison for interspecies understanding or something equally impressive sounding. We could travel between worlds, help other species learn from each other, maybe even find new allies for the next time someone like the Void Reaper shows up." It was, Princess Lyrelei realized, a thoroughly human suggestion. Logical institutions and traditional career paths were less important than the opportunity to make a real difference. The proposal violated numerous protocols and would require convincing 2 separate governments to create unprecedented positions. It was also exactly what she wanted to do. "You know," she said, her skin now displaying brilliant patterns of gold and silver, "for a diplomat, you have a remarkably talent for suggesting highly irregular solutions." Marcus smiled. "I learned from the best. A certain alien princess taught me that sometimes the most irregular solutions are the most effective ones." "In that case," Princess Lyrelei said, standing from her throne with a decision that felt as natural as breathing, "I believe it's time for both of us to submit some very unusual resignation letters." The laughter that followed echoed through the Crystal Palace, mixing human warmth with Zephyrian music to create something entirely new. It was the sound of 2 species learning that the universe was vast enough to contain more possibilities than either had imagined alone. As the formal ceremonies continued around them, Princess Lyrelei and Marcus began planning their next impossible mission, teaching the galaxy that differences were not obstacles to overcome, but gifts to be shared. It would be challenging, unpredictable, and probably a bit chaotic. In other words, it would be perfectly human.